Uncomfortable truths, scientific spirit to untangle complex reality. So when it comes to uncomfortable truths, obviously the discomfort that they inspire motivates a behavior of avoidance, because it's uncomfortable to know the truth when it's an uncomfortable truth. And so instead of encountering that truth and dealing with it as you see fit, we opt for the bliss of ignorance. But the bliss of ignorance will eventually come back and bite us in the bud, because what happens in reality, whether you like it or not, is going to affect you in some way. So the implications of uncomfortable truths will eventually come back and bite us in the bud, whether we like it or not. So to my mind, it's better to engage with these uncomfortable truths and deal with them, almost like preemptively deal with them, so that the downstream effects of these truths are somewhat minimized or easier to deal with, because we've done our homework, so to say. So this uncomfortable truth is fairly widely accepted, but I don't think the implications of it are well understood. And I think that's actually why it's widely accepted and it's just allowed to perpetuate. So this one is that politicians are liars. Nothing new there. But what does it mean for a politician to be a liar? Why does a politician feel the need to lie? If not because he or she is pursuing their own personal agenda, which does not align with the interests of the public. He or she is pursuing their own self-interested goals that happen to come at the cost of the public. Why else would they lie? There would be no need to lie otherwise. So when we say politicians are liars, I don't think we understand the implications that, oh, that's because they're conspiring against the interests of the public for their own gain. And I think this is much more complex than we currently understand. And this is why I tend to write these pieces and speak to these ideas. Not because I think they're the truth, whatever that is, but because I think we need to scratch beneath the surface of what's going on to figure this out. Now, whether we do figure it out is another question. But at least let's try to figure it out so that we can avoid the downstream consequences of these uncomfortable truths, for want of a better word. So the politicians themselves are beholden to what I'm here referring to as the homogenizing force. This homogenizing force is the same force that acts on us as normal individuals and restricts the set of all available options to us in terms of the course we might take through life to a certain set that ultimately results in individuals who all look and behave, think and speak the same. Other authors and writers have spoken to this same force, which is multifaceted. It has many aspects about it. But Paul Kingsnorth, the recovering environmentalist, referred to it as the machine, and Nate Hagens, the scholar and energy expert, he refers to it as the superorganism. So how do we think about this? We can think about it as something that is imposed on us as individuals and that determines the course of action that we can take. Whether it is an organic emergent property of how we humans socially organize or is artificially imposed on us from the top down is a question for another day. Let's just accept that this is determining the actions of individuals, normal individuals and political individuals too. So with this homogenizing force determining our actions, there comes a sort of a creeping totalitarianism, because for some reason this force, the most profitable actions to take from within the bounds of this force are against the interests of the public. And when that happens, obviously to prevent revolution or any sort of an uprising, it has to be cryptically done so it has to be hidden from the public, the harmful effects. Or, and I think this is where we're headed if we fail to recognize where we're at in history, we're going to be silently led into that state, novel state of totalitarian control without much objection, because it's so hidden and it's so cryptic that we actually couldn't even point to it before it happened. And then when it's upon us, it's just like, oh my, how did we get here? But we could have identified it and avoided getting to that place had we just put in the work preemptively before. So with this is a hypothesis from which certain predictions stem, and from which we can derive some identifiable characteristics of this creeping totalitarianism. So one of those characteristics is an oversimplification of reality. One of the examples of this oversimplification is the concentration of evil into single personalities. Think about Putin, Trump, Kim Jong-un. These people are pedestalized as evil. The implication is, if only we could remove those people from their positions of power, then evil will be defeated by good, which actually is a childish notion of good and evil. And I think it's a sort of an Americanized way of seeing the world, and especially with like the proliferation of movies where that which is good and that which is evil is just blatantly obvious. I don't think it's that simple in reality. I think reality is far more complex than that. And this is the point. If we could view instead these people, these personalities, as actually, if we can see behind the facade of these people as pure evil, and instead ask the question, why are they being portrayed as pure evil? Who does that benefit? What is the function of their being portrayed as such? Then I think we're going to scratch beneath the surface and actually get closer to the truth of reality than we currently are. Instead of viewing them as pure evil and once removed, good prevails once more, we could just see them as spearheads of a system that perpetuates evil. And instead of isolating the personalities who are just spearheads, look to the system that is perpetuating that evil and seek to address the problem at its root cause, as opposed to one of the symptoms of the problem. Because you remove that personality, then there's a vacuum that's opened up right there, and somebody else, another personality, is just going to fill that niche, and we're then going to isolate that personality, seek to remove them, and sort of just, it's an eternal cycle. We'll find ourselves in an eternal cycle and wonder to ourselves, why does this problem never end? So for me, I think the best antidote to this modern craziness, and to really actually figure out where we're at in history, is the scientific spirit. The scientific spirit, when embodied by a person, is a willingness to deal with uncomfortable truths, and it's a desire to earnestly understand reality, and it's an impulse towards exploration, discovery, innovation, figuring things out, not simply accepting what we're told by whoever it is that's telling us, be it the politicians or whatever, but instead doing our due diligence and engaging in dialogue with other people who adopt a similar scientific attitude to really try and figure this out. Why, you might ask? To avoid the downstream effects of uncomfortable truths. Those effects are harmful to us as humans, and so to avoid that harm, we engage in the somewhat uncomfortable discussion of the reality of our situation. We develop our critical faculties to be able to see the world for what it is, to be able to see alternative paths that were previously shrouded in a thick fog. For what function? Don't ask me again. That's probably a topic for another day. But develop the eyes to see those alternative paths to prevent our being harmed at some point in the future, or our continual being harmed in the present. So that is why we want to do this, which is important to understand. The why that's motivating your actions. And I think an analogy that's useful here is the analogy of the person who goes to the gym to lift weights. He or she knows that unless they incrementally increase the amount of stress that they're exposing their body to. They're never going to grow. They're never going to put on the muscle mass that they want to. And so in the same way, we're faced with a complex reality and a certain amount of adversity, but we can look at it as an opportunity, seize the opportunity for what it is, because without this adversity, we never would have had the opportunity to develop our critical faculties and figure out a way to most beautifully express human life. Figure out how to more beautifully express what it means to be a human